Hello, welcome to my channel, and today I'll be showing you what I did for the 6 fan arts challenge. And the first character I got to do was Racoon from Guardians of the Galaxy, and at the moment I had been doing a lot of very smiley, very normal faces, so I jumped at the opportunity of doing a more expressive face, and I wanted to play a little bit with the shape of the head and twist and squish and squash the face. So that's why one of his eyes is a little bit smaller and the other one's a little bit bigger, and his smile is sideways. And it was a nice challenge for me because I wanted to really capture the essence of this character and how he's witty and funny, and I think for the most part that came through in the design. His eyebrows are all like very arched and let you know that he is thinking a lot, and his smile is, you know, a little bit impish, and the rest of the expression was mostly achieved with the swirl on the dark part behind his eyes that helped unify the whole face. This could be the Rocket from an animated movie, and I'm very pleased with that. He was by far my favorite of this bunch. He was very fun to draw. Next up is Gautam from Dragonball Z. So I was not very familiar with the character of Gautam. I suppose he is Goku's son, and because of that I just went with what the reference gave me. He had this a little bit mistrustful face, so I went with that. I did a very basic child head and put on some big eyes, some freckles, and this hair was the most challenging part of this drawing. Anime style hair does not work its way that well within my style, and even though I like it, I didn't want to just put spiky anime hair on this design. I wanted it to make it more me. So I gave it a few goes. I first tried with the anime hair, didn't like it, and then I tried doing this mullet that it wasn't going to happen, and finally I arrived at this design. The rest of the drawing I tried to keep as close to the source material as possible, because this is the trick with fan arts. If you veer too far away from what the character originally is, it ends up not looking like them. So you have to put your style in it but save some identifiers. In this case, the hair color, the whole color scheme, and his uniform are all very much the same from the series, even though his face is a little bit different. Mainly, his eyes are not anime eyes, his nose is not the traditional anime nose, and his hair is not as spiky. Next up is, in case you haven't guessed, Joe Exotic. And this challenge, I asked for the characters in the beginning of April when Tiger King was all the rage and all the memes were coming about, and he was probably the most requested character, and it was also one of the most challenging ones. I knew from the get-go that I knew how I wanted his eyes to be, but the rest of the drawing was more me playing around and figuring out his face shape and how it would look. I could have just done a more realistic approach at his face and just do the coloring and the shading like I would do an illustration. But in a way, I felt like that was a bit of a cop-out, and I really wanted to put him through the illustration machine and have him come out as he would look as if he was in fact just a character and not a real person. So working from the eyes and the rest of the face, I was able to somehow find a way to make him look like an illustration. And even though he had his name on the cap, the other challenging aspect of this one, as I was talking about fanarts, because this is a real person, even though he's like a larger than life character and has costumes and a very defined look, it's not as easy as, say, Gautam, who has a martial arts orange and dark blue costume and black spiky hair, and that's very indicative of Dragon Ball Z. When it's a real person, it is a bit more difficult because there's no color or shape identifiers that make it more easy. So I played a little bit with the shirt. It was first blue, like one that he has on this picture that he appears with a tiger, and then I changed it to a golden color because that seemed closer to tigers, and it looked shiny and it looked like something that he would wear. And it's always funny to me how lines can make a drawing seem like they're on their weird teenage phase, because with the dark lines, it looks so unfinished and untextured, and I was so insecure about it. But as soon as those lines were colored and blended in, it just sort of like popped and became so 3D. So I was so happy to get rid of the lines and hide them, and I think it looked pretty okay. I think it looks recognizable as Joe Exotic. What do you think? Next one up is Saff, also from Tiger King, and this is a person that got their arm bitten by a tiger and decided to have it amputated to go back to work with the tigers. And on the opposite side of Joe's drawing, this one was a lot more easygoing, mainly because this person has a more regular, rounder face, whereas Joe's was a much more dynamic face. And also, the central focus of this illustration is Saff's eyes, which are very expressive, and he has this calm, serene look on his eyes. So that really grounded the whole illustration, and I built it around that. His whole demeanor in the show seems like a very chill, calm person, contrary to Joe, who's a much more dynamic personality, and that also had to come through in the illustration and in the angles of his face. So these two people, even though they're from the same show, took me through two very different journeys until I arrived to an illustration that I was satisfied with. And next one is Princess Kira from Atlantis, and This was the one that broke me. I did a ton of sketches over and over again, and I felt every single time like I was just drawing the exact same reference, and it almost broke me. So sometimes when you want to apply stylization to something, you start looking at the reference and you end up drawing the exact same thing, and it can be very, very frustrating. And that was what was going on with this drawing. I just kept looking at the illustration and drawing the exact same thing, and anytime I tried to do different, it would look so different that I wouldn't like it. So I ended up finding a way to work through the situation. Instead of trying to veer away from the reference, I just went in and drew the reference, and then started to look for spaces where I could see that it was not like my style. And you can see that in the hair, that it becomes rounder and not as square as the original drawing. And also her face shape and head shape changed, and the body changed a little bit. So I was able to find a way of making it work, but it was very, very challenging. And because I was a little bit unsatisfied with the drawing journey of this one, I wanted to make the shading much more dynamic, and I tried to recreate the same shading that she has on this scene on the movie, and she's basically on shadows but has a strong light coming through the side, and I recreated that lighting, and in the end it looked pretty good. And I was happy to do a princess that is not as drawn as the other ones. The person that asked for this one only asked me to draw a Disney princess, and I could have gone with any of the other ones, but I feel like Kira from Atlantis is almost never talked about or never appears in any Disney materials, because it's a much more obscure, not a successful film. So I just decided to draw a more obscure character from Disney. And last is Dream from the Sandman. And I didn't know a lot about the character. I know that he is an embodiment of dreams and the world of dreams, but I didn't know much more about that. I haven't read the comic. It's on my to-do list since forever, but I haven't been able to read it. And to close that gap of me not knowing much about the character, I went and read a little bit about him, and he's mostly based on Peter Murphy from the band Bauhaus. And what I did was look up this picture of a young Peter Murphy and based my whole drawing on this picture of him. And following the reference picture, I stylized it a lot. I made his neck a lot more elongated, his face more elongated, and gave it a longer chin. I wanted it to have a strong profile and that it would look ethereal and otherworldly. And I also wanted to give the character a little bit of a more dynamic coloring, since the images I saw from the comic are mostly comic printed images and they're a little bit flatter, and they do shadows with the inking. So I wanted to make a much more three-dimensional design, but I wanted to keep the shadow on his eyes, like they're mysterious and they're dark. So that's why I decided to keep them in darkness. And I really like this grayish tone on his face and that cheekbone and the highlight on top of it. It looks so carved, and I don't know, it has so much character. And because he's this cosmic, eternal being, I put him against this spacey background. So this is my 6 fan arts. I really enjoy doing this challenge. I always like the opportunity to interpret other people's designs or stylize someone from real life as an illustration, and it was pretty fun. They were all very different characters, so each had their own very unique challenge. So thanks to M. Capriglio One Art, I hope I said that right, for creating this fun template. And thank you for watching this video. If you like it, hit the subscribe button, hit like, and come back to the cabinet.